Wonderful. So this is a special menopause edition of Thriving Through Midlife. But did you know that women's ambition increase after the age of 55 before peaking at 65? While many of us fear aging as a time of our lives when we will become invisible, it can actually be a vibrant and empowering moment to finally learn to embrace who we are and to push ahead with our goals. In fact, research recently found that contrary to popular belief, many women reach their peak in the second stage of their careers. Happily accepting the process of aging in this way can have huge psychological benefits for both our work and our personal lives. The concept of positive aging encourages us to celebrate each moment of our life that we get to live. If the pandemic has taught us anything, it is that getting older truly is a privilege. So despite the fact that menopause is a natural process that all women will experience, there is silence and taboo associated with it. So we are privileged to have these three women who I believe not only embody women thriving through midlife, they also champion women in menopause with their expertise and guidance. So I'd like to introduce Angela, beautiful Angela Cancel, Brenda Rogers, and Sandy Davis. Thank you. So lovely to see you all. Gorgeous. Okay, so I'm going to jump straight into the questions, okay? So we're going to start off with you, Angela, and we're all going to answer the questions, but we're going to start off with you, okay? So you can just warm yourself up as I read out the question. In Western cultures, we think about midlife. When we think about midlife, we're not encouraged to think of it as a time that women thrive. What messages did you receive about midlife, Angela?
Actually, I have to say very, very few. My mother had a full hysterectomy in her very early 20s. So she would have gone through menopause, in her 20s, and I was still a baby. So I really didn't know much about it at all. As a naturopath, I studied. We were taught a little bit, basically hot flushes and mood swings is about all that we were taught about menopause, and it was the subject that was shoved on right at the very end of the last year of the last module. It just wasn't talked about. So I knew it was going to happen. All I thought was my period's going to stop. That's kind of about where I was at, and I did not know too much more at all. And so it was a journey for me to discover what menopause is all about.
How about midlife in general, though?
Well, I had my kids later in life. So I had my first at 40 and second at 43. So midlife itself, I was probably in the middle of raising, what is midlife to start with? But, if we're talking mid 40s to early 50s, I was in the middle of raising young children. So I didn't really get what midlife, it wasn't something that was on my horizon. I was a new mum, and that was kind of where I was at. So I kind of popped out the other side, and I'm 60 now, and it's like, okay, this is where I'm at right now.
Right, thank you. Great. Okay, let's go over to you, Sandy.
Yeah, well, good morning, everyone. I think for me, one of the biggest things with going into menopause was that, we don't talk about perimenopause. So for me, when I started having experiences of menopausal symptoms and going to my GP, the response was, it's just perimenopause. So I ended up being filled with anxiety and worry, which I've always just barreled through and pushed through everything. And all of a sudden I was thinking, holy dooly, if this is so bad in perimenopause and my GP is saying it's just perimenopause, what's going to happen in menopause? How am I going to cope? And what I didn't realize was that whole roller coaster of peri, that is the flux of the symptoms that you're going to deal with. And I guess that's part of my mission now in trying to destigmatize menopause, is that making sure we know that those things that happen in peri, that's the journey that's taking us to that cessation of menstruation. And I just wish I would have known that and I guess had a bit more armor to be able to say, hang on, give me a bit more information here. And part of my mission now is trying to make sure that none of us struggle or flounder alone through that journey.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to come back. I'm going to say the same thing I said to Angela is, what was the message you received around midlife? Because I'm going to come to your experience with menopause in a moment. So tell me about midlife, the messages you received on midlife.
The biggest message in midlife for me was, I think, kind of almost like a disregard of the symptoms that I was facing. It was kind of like, just get on with it. And I think that was a common chorus that was coming back at women under 50 when I started to go through perimenopause and midlife. There was just this disregard of assuming that menopause was something so much later. So there was this kind of unspoken message of just get on with it.
Yes.
In that peri era of midlife.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. So Brenda, so I'm going to ask you the question. I'm going to repeat the question again. So Western culture, we think about midlife. We're not encouraged to think about it as a time that women thrive. What message did you receive about midlife? Brenda?
Yeah, I think the message, it's really significant because of the absence of the messages and this denial. It's like there's something happening down the track called menopause, but I don't want to know about it. And so that tells me that the messages that I was receiving were much deeper. And the messages were, it's something to be hidden, something, and we call it taboo, something scary, something, and we have the imagery in media of women at that age throwing the turkey out the window or, being the shrew and that kind of thing. So those messages definitely filtered through for me as well, because they're part of our DNA, our Western DNA. Yeah. The other thing personally, though, that I've learned since is that our menstrual journey starts at menarche, at our first period. And I've learned from Jane Hardwick Collins, some of you will know her, about how we deal, or our experience of menarche flows through and often is similar to our experience of pregnancy and birth or motherhood. And then there can be elements of that come through in our experience of menopause as well. And my puberty, my menarche was all hidden. It was secretive. It was shameful. It was embarrassing. It was frightened about, bleeding on your clothes and, all that stuff. So I think the overall message of midlife is fear.
Thank you. So I'm going to get to the next question, which is about some of the challenges. So for me, I had what's called surgically induced menopause. So I went into menopause after having a hysterectomy, and that was around late 40s. I had my hysterectomy. I was told that I wasn't going to go into menopause because they kept one fallopian tube in, but literally weeks later, I went into menopause. And I have to say, it was for me the best thing that ever happened to me, because I had terrible bleeding. I was really happy to see the end of my menstrual years. What about you? So let's go to Angela. Why don't we go to you first? What's some of the challenges that you faced around menopause?
Okay, so as I said originally, because I had my children later in life, I really didn't, because perimenopause is a relatively new term. So I didn't really know about perimenopause because I was a mum with 2 young kids and didn't know that I was having a very regular period actually after I had my second child, because I'd had lots of issues with my cycle beforehand with fibroids and all that. Once I had my second, I was really, really regular. So every 28 days, there was no PMS, no nothing. It would just arrive for a few days and it was gone. So I really didn't think too much about what was going to happen. And until all of a sudden, occasionally I'd be getting a few hot flushes and I'm going, okay, rightio. But my biggest challenge, I had a couple. My first challenge was pain. And I was never aware that joint and body pain had anything to do with hormones. So I was getting more and more pain. I didn't sleep for nearly 2 years because I was in so much pain. I was diagnosed with osteoarthritis in one hip, but it was more than just the hip. I mean, I'd wake up in the morning and I'd feel like 110 years old. I just couldn't move until I was doing a bit of reading one day and actually read that this is, particularly these days, becoming more and more of a common symptom that is happening. And it's because we are a lot more active than our grandmothers were and our mothers were. And I started to do a bit of research and realize what the role estrogen was playing in that. So once I kind of understood what the cause was, then I could address it. And alongside that was also the weight gain. So I always was a relatively healthy weight. When I had my daughter at the time, it was the lowest weight I had been, just before I fell pregnant with her, since my teens. And then the weight just kept coming on, even though I hadn't changed. I was still exercising. I was still eating I used to eat a keto diet, but I was finding keto was harder and harder for me to do. I couldn't stick to it. I couldn't do it. And then the weight was just going on, and I was really ashamed. So as a naturopath that works with women who are going through this stage of life, I was really ashamed, and I couldn't talk about, this is the right diet, because the right diet supposedly was keto, but it wasn't the right diet for me. And I didn't know what to say. So it was really hard. That was a big challenge for me until I found the answer that worked for me. And once I found the answer and I dropped the weight, and now I'm a lower weight than I was when I fell pregnant with my daughter, and I've sustained it. It's like, and that kind of went hand in hand with the pain, because now I know that if I get pain, it's to do with the food that I'm eating, because it's all about inflammation. It's all about insulin resistance. And now I understand more of that and understand why that's playing a role and how estrogen is impacting that. I can actually do something about the inflammation, the insulin resistance, and the stress. I don't need to be too concerned about the level of the hormones, because that sorts itself out. So my biggest challenges were pain and weight gain, and I have been able to, I manage both of them quite well right now.
Beautiful. And I can see in the chat there's a lot of things around weight gain and joint pain. Jackie's saying that's also something she really relates to as well. Thank you for that. There was so much good information there. I really, really appreciate that. I'm sure that the women are really getting a lot out of that. I want to go to Brenda next. Brenda?
Yeah, challenges. I think I had a perception that menopause was a bunch of symptoms. And I was pretty confident, because I'd been a naturopath for a long time. I was pretty confident that I wasn't going to have a menopause, because I'm a nutritionist. I eat well, blah, blah, blah. And what I didn't understand was the psychological journey and the spiritual journey of menopause. And one of the things that I've learned is that in your 40s, you can have this profound sense of failure as you reach this midlife reckoning. And I experienced that. I was in a type A type of person, ambitious. And here I was in my 40s, and all these things that I thought I should have by now, the house, the man, the child, all that kind of stuff, they were absent, in many respects. I really wasn't appreciating what I did have. And so there was this kind of urgency to fix all of that really quickly. And I see that in other women as well. It's like, well, I better go and find the man. I better have that baby. I better have, But the issue with it was that I felt so badly about myself. I felt so lost. I felt so I didn't fit in anywhere. I know I wasn't a valid, contributor to the community. It was like really dark stuff for quite a while. And, it was lovely to go through the portal of menopause, or the portal, or the rebirth of menopause, and to really discover my own strengths. And one of those is being childless. So I had a pregnancy that didn't go according to plan, like so many other things, and childless. And I think it's really hard for childless women, menopause, because, you probably thought, like I did, that you would have, like every other woman, you would, like you're supposed to, you would have a family by then. And so there was a deep sense of feminine failure for me around that. And it's taken years of work, inner work, and serving others as well on this journey, that I've learned to appreciate, you know, what being a woman is and my part in all of that.
Thank you. And I really relate to that as a child-free woman myself, going through that stage, because once menopause is over, once you hit menopause, it's over. That dream is really well and truly dusted. But I don't think we talk about the psychological impact of menopause that you talked about as well. And obviously as a therapist, that's where I meet a lot of women in midlife, is that when they're going through that. So really appreciate you sharing that. So before we come to Sandy, I'm just going to read Pam. Pam wrote, I struggled during my menstrual cycle, have not given birth, and I struggled big time in menopause from age 53 to age 16. It's just in January that the symptoms have stopped. My mother struggled in menopause and just kept saying, I'm going through the change. She was very irritable and had a lot of repressed anger. Yeah, I bet. Thank you for sharing that. Over to you, Sandy.
Yeah, well, on that note of the repressed anger, you know, one of the biggest things for me is I am usually a very happy, very joyful person. And I started having moments of flash anger, and it was a real struggle for me to address them and embrace them and find a way through them. But even bigger than that for me, like Angela, I had some joint inflammation, that sort of thing. We used to joke in our family about my menopausal knuckle, because I had a knuckle that would flare up. But the hardest thing, I like to get through a finish line. And I like to know where I'm going. And with that irregularity of menstrual cycles, and then no period for a few months, and then you'd have a heavy flooding event, it could be very socially embarrassing. You had to always plan, if you were going away or anything, to take all of your additional materials for your cycle. If your cycle sprung up and said, hello, I'm back. And I remember being at about the 10-month mark of no cycle and thinking, oh, I'm almost there. It's the finish line. Hey, I'm about to make this crossing into menopause. And we were away in Brisbane visiting family, and I was in a shopping center and just thought, oh, this doesn't feel right. And I was in light colored clothing. And honestly, if our adult children hadn't been with us and I had to have this guise of having it together, I think I probably would have sat in the stall and sobbed, and then absolutely been the death of my husband, him having to come into the women's bathroom to check on me. And just having to pull myself together and be a grown up and go to the chemist and get the supplies that I needed. I felt like I was 13 again. And just those flooding events for me were the hardest thing to manage as a challenge. And just feeling then, like when after 10 months, one hits again and you've got to go back to ground zero and start all over. And then that whole time you think, oh, is another one going to come? That's, I think, one of the hardest things when we're a confident person that's used to being in tune with our body. And then all of a sudden, something that we can't control or direct, it kind of pushes us outside our comfort zone.
Yeah, great, thank you. And Jackie, agrees with you. She has a similar experience of, yes, I've just had 6 months with no period, and my period arrived this week. I'm 56. And that's it, exactly. It's so difficult this time, isn't it, when you're in that in-between stage? So
you will get through.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so the next question is around myths that surround menopause. And I think what makes menopause so challenging for many women, and certainly for me, is that there's so little, well, I didn't know where to look, but I found so little information about it. So it's so easy then for us to drop down believing in the myths. So I want you to share with us. So I'm going to start with you, Brenda, this time. What are some unhelpful myths that you have heard that surrounds menopause?
Yeah, there's so many. I could go physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual. Oh, sorry, you've just caught me off guard, Faith. I maybe go
come
to
back to you.
maybe go to Sandy and
Yeah. Let's just go to Angela then. We'll go to Angela because Sandy's just spoken. Okay, Angela, over to you.
As Brenda says, there are many, but let's start with that it's all about hormones, because it's not all about hormones. Yes, your hormones are shifting, but we need to go below the hormones, because if you just think it's about hormone deficiency, menopause is not a condition of hormone deficiency. Hormones drop, they're meant to drop. We're no longer ovulating, we're no longer producing eggs, we're no longer preparing our body for pregnancy. So when we've got these symptoms, which are common, not normal, that's another thing. It's like everyone says that they're normal. No, they're actually common, because if they were normal, everybody would experience the same thing. It's common. So we need to stop normalizing it, because then it's like Sandy says, the doctor says, oh, it's just perimenopause. By normalizing this stuff, we're saying that it's not actually really happening. There's nothing you can really do about it. But we need to go below the hormones and look at why the hormones are reacting the way they are. Hormones are simply messengers. And as our ovaries shut down production, our adrenal glands can take over that production. So why are the adrenal glands not able to produce the lower level of hormone that will keep us healthy and living a great life? And generally it's because we are highly, highly stressed. It's because we're not eating a good diet, or we're drinking too much alcohol, or having too much sugar. We're not moving our bodies the right way. We're exposing ourselves to hormone disrupting chemicals, and we've got this mindset that it's going to be a struggle. And if you think it's going to be a struggle, it will be a struggle. So, the biggest, as I said, there's so many myths, but I'm going to say that it's all about your hormones. That is a myth. There's so much more. We've got to get deeper. And when we go deeper and we address the food, the movement, the toxins, the mindset, the stress, when we address that, hormones will balance themselves, because the body knows exactly what it needs to do. We have this innate intelligence. The body knows what to do. Trust your body and deal with what's the real reason. And stress is number one, over and above everything. And then the food and exercise and all of that comes in there as well. So that's it.
Beautiful. And that's such a great message, isn't it? That's great news and a great reminder that the body knows what to do, and the body would naturally regulate itself when it's given the right conditions. So thank you. That's beautiful. It's powerful. Sandy, over to you.
One of the biggest myths I faced repeatedly was just that whole negative language around menopause, that it's all over, or that just wait, with that whole negative connotation. And yet it is stepping into our power and redefining ourselves with an amazing amount of freedom. And it is, I'm discovering in postmenopause, our time to thrive. And I love it. And I love the joy of that. And I think that myth that it's all over and we're past our prime is probably the most harmful of the myths that I encountered. And one of the private kind of things I encountered from a lot of women was, I suppose, that assumption that your sexuality doesn't change, it dies. And I didn't really understand. And then I hit a flatline libido stage. And for me, with Happy Balls Balm, I'm always talking about it's about so much more than intimacy with dryness. And then all of a sudden here I was faced with libido issues. And I was just so grateful to Susan Jarvis, that's in our audience today, because she assured me that that sexual desire would return and my flame would rekindle. And when it does, it's almost like we were opening up again as a flower into a whole nother era, which I love, because it kind of goes back to some of the ancient Greece myths around re-becoming a princess or a goddess in your third age. So I love that.
Amazing. Thank you. And Jackie said something about the hormones. Oh, I missed it. Agree. Okay. Yes, my ovaries weren't driving the bus anymore, but I can still look forward to being sexual. Yes, and I love all the work that you do, Sandy, specifically around vaginal dryness. I've got my Happy Pause vaginal dryness cream here, and I like to think of I like to think of Sandy solving the issue of vaginal dryness one vagina at a time. You've certainly done mine, so I'm really grateful for that. So thank you. So over to you, Brenda.
Yes, thanks, guys, for leading the way. I think it's a little bit of both. I think there is a really huge cultural push to medicalize menopause and to treat it as a disease. You know, I get alerts each day for research and so on around menopause, and often it's referred to as an estrogen deficiency, as Angela mentioned, which is completely wrong and unfair. So there is this narrative that women are past their use-by date, and that's a culture that only recognises women as reproductive beings, and we're way more than that. And so I loved your Faith, that what you said right at the beginning about women really being in their peak at 55 to 65. And certainly that's my experience. I think that power, though, and this is the myth, I think that feminine power, which many of us haven't really got, we haven't really nourished that because it relates to our menstrual cycles while we're still menstruating. We need to be reintroduced to that. We need to work out what that means for us, because otherwise, and here's a little bit of a trigger warning, but the suicide rate for women is highest at 45 to 50 and second highest at 50 to 55. And most of us who've been through menopause can understand why. That's really can be a really difficult stage. And I think the truth, the myth busting is that it's a really powerful time for women, and our world is scared of that power, feminine power. They're so scared of it.
Thank you. Thank you, Brenda. I'm just going to share Delwyn's myth before we move on to the next question. So, massive myth from my own mother. Women suffering symptoms are just looking for attention. It's all in their mind. Wow. Absolutely. Wow. Interesting.
So unfair.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to just take a little pause from menopause. We're going to come back to it for our last question, but this is just more of a general one. So as women in our 50s and 60s, we will be excited to know that according to research, we reach our career peak at 65 years old, with retirement now believed to be redundant. Can you share some of your personal and professional goals for the coming years? Let's go to Angela.
Okay, I can remember at about 55, being in the middle of my lounge room floor, on my knees, in tears, going, what the hell am I doing? Why am I doing this? Why am I here? What's my purpose? I can just remember, and I went into a real downslide after that for quite some time, because I really didn't know what was next. It was kind of like, because my daughter my youngest had just finished primary school, and so obviously, no longer needed me as much, and so it was like, who am I? And I had a massive change then, and I'm actually going through another massive change right now. So I've just turned 60. My youngest is now, she's actually just about to finish high school. So my eldest has already been away at university for 2 years. We are packing a house up, and we're selling and moving to another state, to a property that we've got in Queensland. And I'm sitting here right now, and have been for the last few months, going, well, what's next? And I actually can't tell you what next is. I don't know. I know that something is going to change. I know I've tried to, just not work as much, not be in my business as much, because I physically don't need to be in my business as much. I've set it so that I don't need to be doing as much anymore. But that's kind of leaving a big hole, and I don't know what's going to fill that hole. At the moment, I'm just going day by day until we have moved. And we've settled in on, because we're moving into 10 acres. So, and it's like completely different now. I overlook the ocean. We're moving to the bush. So I'm going to have to reset things up. I'm going to have to find my place there. So I don't know what is next for me. I just know that one of the things that I do find really exciting, though, because when we get to this age, times of doing things first, there aren't too many more firsts left in our life because we've done everything. So for me, what I am looking forward to is the firsts. And my husband and I were talking the other day, and he says, oh, well, when we put chickens on the farm, I said, well, we're going to put other animals. And he says, well, do we know what to do with them? I said, I don't know, but we could learn. So that's what it is. It's like now there's some more firsts. I've never lived on farm property before because I've always lived in the city. So there's a whole pile of new firsts that are coming up for me in the coming years. And part of it scares me. The other part is really excited about what can happen.
I feel really excited for you. Like just being in that precipice of a new adventure, I feel the excitement. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's go to you, Sandy.
Yeah, well, I had semi-retired to far north Queensland and was just living this bliss of semi-retirement and giving other people my expertise in their businesses. And then this pesky thing of dryness came along and forced me back into entrepreneurship and business ownership again with Happy Paws. So I suppose, Faith, you already nailed it. It's just going to be continuing to grow the word of Happy Paws and solving dryness one vagina at a time, because we deserve to feel good down there because it makes such a difference to help us feel good everywhere. So just being a part of that, resilience and stepping into our power through feeling good about every aspect of how we physically feel.
Yeah, wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you. Brenda?
My mission has become about empowering other women to find their flow, so to speak, not their menstrual flow anymore, but their new flow through natural medicine. I'm a passionate nutritionist, and I love teaching women to get back into the kitchen and to reconnect with the provenance and the passion and the sacredness of food and the sacredness of the kitchen. So a lot of women, we've been indoctrinated since the 70s to be out of the kitchen. And that's to our own detriment, I believe, in many cases, because it's taken our power away over feeding our families. There's a lot more I could say about that. That's a gross generalization, but you kind of get the picture. And then the other thing, I'm giving birth to my business at the moment as well, and bringing out programs that I think start to address those needs that the women with low self-esteem, with, who am I, with my weight is not about what I'm eating anymore. It's about why I'm eating. It's I've buried stuff inside me. So it's this beautiful physical, psycho-spiritual journey that I'm birthing this business that is addressing those things at the various different levels. It's a bit tricky, and I'm having challenges in understanding how to do all that and to be the entrepreneur and everything, but I've never been more excited about getting up in the morning. So I think it feels right.
Great. So we're going to just go to Janelle's comment, which really speaks to what, the expertise that you impart and how you help women. Finding our place in middle age is challenging and up to us to create it. Can so relate to your story, Angela. I met Brenda Rogers about 2 years ago when in the worst place. Her amazing wisdom and treatment protocols have been integral in supporting me find myself and be okay in my new body, to find my new flow. That's really
I didn't pay her for that.
No. That was really good. Thank you. Yeah. So our final question. Okay, so how can we rewrite the narrative that surrounds menopause? And I feel passionate about this with Silver Sirens. This is kind of why I launched the portal, so that we can start to recreate and rewrite what the women to come, how they experience menopause and this process. So let's go to you, Angela. How can we rewrite it?
By accepting that there's nothing you can do to stop it from happening. It's going to happen. How it's going to happen, you can actually be in control of. We don't have to say, you know, if you, as I said before, if you believe it's going to be a struggle, pretty much it's going to be a struggle. But if you can embrace this time of life and start to listen to your body and hear the messages that your body has to tell you, because your body is telling you, if you've got symptoms, what is it trying to tell you? What is it that you're not looking after yourself? What I want women to know is that you have the power. You actually already have the knowledge. Just you may not be tapping into it. You may not know, be quite as intuitive. You might need guidance to get there, but your body already knows exactly what it needs to do. And we need to start trusting our bodies rather than putting the trust outside and saying someone else has to get me out of this problem. Own it, embrace it, and find people who will help you, who will guide you along the way. But when it comes down to it, you have the answer. You know the answer. So that's the narrative I want. I want women to actually embrace this time, and I want them to know that the power lies with them, not with anyone else.
Beautiful. So I accept the things I cannot change, because we cannot, we're all going to experience it. But then we learn to trust ourselves, that we actually have our own guidance. We are our own guidance. Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Thank you. Sandy?
Yeah, well, we're doing it right here. Having these conversations and opening up the dialogue and destigmatizing menopause. And I never realized there was so much stigma around menopause until I threw myself out there as the Vag Queen. And then all of a sudden, I just found I was dodging curveballs and slings all the time. It's such a sensitive topic. And I love that we are breaking down those barriers and I guess being the harbingers of hope for the next generation to turn this from a negative conversation into each of us finding the magic in our own journey to make it our time to thrive and find the solutions that take us into that thriving, because they're there. We just have to be able to find them for each of our unique journeys.
Beautiful. So I'm just going to read Pam's one. Okay. So just here before I move on. So I did all that during energy healing sessions, and I still had a hard time. I had anxiety and lack of motivation. It was not my mind telling myself that I was going to struggle. I did affirmations, meditations, and I still had the symptoms. I only now feel empowered. I was so stressed that I was questioning everything I did. And I think that speaks to what Angela said about the role of stress. The stress plays a really, really big part. But I do hear you, Pam, that you did a lot of affirmations, and I know Pam, and she does a lot of energy healing as well. So thank you. Okay, let's go to you, Brenda.
I think it's important to be gentle and kind with yourself, because it does take time. Even if you feel you have joint pain and weight gain, think in years at least, or months at least, rather than the quick fixes. Don't be seduced by the quick fixes. They do not make things any better. In fact, they make us worse. So to be patient, and I do think that menopause and postmenopause is a sacred call to rest. I think many of us need to relearn the art of resting, and we don't want to slow down. We're busy. We want to do all those things we haven't been able to do, or the empty nest. Women are reinventing themselves and recreating themselves at this time, which is great. I think. There's the eat, pray, love thing, where women want to go and start a business or go back to study or go to India and meditate or whatever. And I acknowledge those. But let me just come back to your specific question. How do we change the narrative? I think we have to work on ourselves first. And that, from a naturopathic wellness, holistic perspective, is having a strong nervous system. So being careful with the stimulants and nourishing your body with beautiful herbs and nutrition that is nourishment more than nutrition. that nourishes your nervous system, nourishes the adrenals, because being exhausted going into perimenopause sets you up for a really big ride. Be strong, physically strong helps in so many ways. You know, if you haven't yet been introduced to joyful movement, then find something. And sometimes it's not boot camp. It's not weight loss boot camp. It might be gardening. It might be dance, something else that you actually love. Because there's this real building of strength that we need to change our own inner narrative about menopause and midlife. It is a time of greater sensitivity. There is a spiritual opening that occurs. We don't talk about this much, but I believe that as the estrogen withdraws and the progesterone bottoms out, these new, if you read Dr. Christiane Northrup's book, The Wisdom of Menopause, she talks about FSH and LH and these other hormones rising. And this is more of the hormones of wisdom, the hormones of intuition and insight. And that opens up at midlife. It's easier to meditate, easier to be quiet and still, so that you can do that inner work and really work out who you are and who you're not. Because, you know, there's this beautiful, we know estrogen is the hormone of compliance. So there's this beautiful, don't give a rat's what people think that opens up. And that, you know, like embrace that. That's like, okay, well, now what do I want? Where do I want to go? What business do I want to create? And I think that's a beautiful thing. So being emotionally resilient, physically resilient, bouncing back, which women do anyway. I think revisiting your past and healing your woundedness with your family and everything, your relationship to food, your relationship to money, that all has this beautiful potential to heal. And then when you're starting, you know, the 1% rule, right? Just get 1% better today, and then 1% better, and then 1% better. When you feel like you're getting a sense of your purpose and the next thing in your life, then you can start to change the narrative in the world. But good luck with that. You know, there's some real vested interests in disempowering women and in medicalizing everything that happens to our bodies. So maybe even give up on that, like I've been trying to change the narrative, and honestly, it just makes you resentful and bitter. I think it's more about, okay, what's my little tiny little square corner of the world where I can help the Nells and the Delwins and the Janes and the, you know, and the Marys and their husbands. That's the other beautiful thing. I'm looking to do something for husbands down the track. I'm not sure they'll ever come to it, but that they're struggling as well. The poor buggers, they have to put up with the woman that they love going through this journey, which they don't understand, and even the woman doesn't understand. And I think if you can get through that and avoid divorce, which is very common in mid-40s at that age, you could have this gorgeous, beautiful relationship. And Sandy can probably speak to this with her particular niche in this area, that the men need education and support as well. So I'm a big educator. I think to change the narrative is to be an educator, to be a teacher.
Fantastic, thank you. And I love what you started with, that it begins with us. Just begin from that place. That's great, thank you. So I'm just going to read a few of the comments, and then we'll see if there's time for one question. So Susan said, I've always been curious to know if our experience of menopause in Western individualist culture is different from other cultures. And I know from my experience as an African woman, my mother's experience was totally different from what I hear. You know, she had very little symptoms. She had none of the psychological symptoms. And I know the research says it's a lot around diet. And I know that, Angela talks about diet being so important as well. And, you know, when I was doing research about menopause a while ago, there was something around yams, there was particular ingredients in yams that meant that those cultures that ate a lot of those sort of tubers experienced less symptoms. And that was what my mother put it to. She just didn't have any physical symptoms at all with hers. I don't know, do any of you want to speak to that? Is it different? Have you found it to be different with Western cultures?
Yes, I'll answer that one for you, Faith. Yes, we do know that women who live traditional cultures, and this was something that I was taught many, many years ago, and it really didn't click too much, but women who are living traditional cultures, so we look at the Asians, they have a higher soy-based diet, also a plant-based diet. They just don't have the symptoms that we do, but they also don't have the stress that we live. They're not living the same type of life. In Japan, they have this word called kaneki, which is called second spring, which is what they call menopause. So they also have a different mindset, because a lot of these traditional cultures, menopause is seen as a celebration. It's seen as a time when women step into being the wise women of the community. So women are actually looking forward to it. So it is, diet plays a role, but also it is this mindset that it is our next spring, it's our second spring. It's our time to step into being the wise women that others look up to, and which I think we just don't have here and in the Western culture. And that's why when I work, I not only look at diet, mindset plays a really big role, because as I've said several times, you think you're going to struggle, you will struggle. It's like, we have this belief that's within us, and it's something that most of us don't even know, that as we age, we've got less value. That is a societal belief that many of us just have within our DNA, that has come down the ages, and it's not even conscious for many of us. But that's what that's how we live our life. But that's not the same type of belief systems that women in traditional cultures have.
Yeah, and I totally agree. My mother, the message is around you looking forward to it, because you take that role as a wisdom holder, and that's a really important, coveted role. So I love that. Sandy, what about you?
Yeah, well, I just keep, I'm trying, I hate this, I've got a bit of brain fog, because I'm trying to remember that amazing Native American quote that you opened last year's Silver Sirens Redefining Aging event with, because that was magic. And that just, it goes straight to the heart of, that honoring our wisdom.
Do you want me to say it?
Yeah, do you? Yes, please.
I remember it. So when a woman hits menstruation, she gets introduced to it. When a girl starts menstruating, she gets introduced to her power. Through midlife, she exercises her power. And in menopause, she becomes her power. So that's paraphrasing.
Yes.
So that idea of becoming the power, love it.
That's it.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Brenda?
Yeah, I think it's been said, Faith, but it's many of us have absorbed a fear of aging. Everything is idolizing the 25-year-old with the perfect body laying over the bonnet of the car. And, even if we don't realize it, we're afraid of being, of aging, and then stepping into that, you have to grapple with those demons. And so that can create another internal stress that Angela's talking about. And other cultures don't have that. And I love hearing about your mother, Faith. And I love that you're doing this to let us know that there's even differences in the world, because I didn't know that 10 years ago, 5 years ago. So more power to you, darling.
Thank you. Thank you. So that brings us to the perfect 10. Beautiful way to end there. Thank you so much, Angela, Brenda, and Sandy. I'm so excited that we got to do this conversation, because I admire all three of you so much. And Angela, like, your work is, in our portal, we love your work there. Women are getting so much out of it. The same with you, Brenda. All of your videos are just amazing. And Sandy, the work that you do with Silver Sirens as a sponsor last year, sponsor this year, and coming on board in our steering committee, I am indebted to you. So I'm so grateful for that. Thank you, ladies, so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Just going to close off the recording.